to give Brian Jackson a round of applause for joining us for the first show. Yes, he was amazing. He has some other stuff that he has to do in the newsroom, so I am all alone now. But joining me is Stayton Bonner, who is talking about this true crime book about, it really sounds like a Hollywood movie when you really look at it. A $7 million French masterpiece of a car vanishes. And Stayton really has a long history of being really in this space, a former Rolling Stone and GQ editor. Thank you so much for being with me.
Thanks so much for having me.
Let's talk about this book. How did you even find out about this story? Because this is a true story.
Yeah, it's all true. It was in my 20 years as an investigative journalist. It was the most amazing story I'd ever come across. Basically, it's like White Lotus meets James Bond meets Fast and Furious. In 2001, in the middle of the night, 3 thieves broke into a plastics mogul's private garage in Milwaukee, just up the road from everyone here in Chicago, and stole a $7 million car. It disappeared in the night, took all the paperwork, took everything. It was gone. And then years later, a detective in Miami gets a call from a mechanic in the French Alps saying, I know where this stolen car is located. And that kicked off this international hunt for this car that involved the FBI, involved Interpol, and brought 2 former friends against each other in this battle. And, you know, it really also just goes into this deeper underbelly of this high-end world with multi-million-dollar cars and competitions in Lake Como and Pebble Beach, but this criminal underbelly just underneath. And that's really the heart of the story of the book.
So a $7 million car vanishes out of Milwaukee, oddly enough. That's not a car you can just drive around. People would notice that. Did you ever find out, you know, during your research that they were driving this car? And then how did it make it all the way to France?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yes, the car can be driven. But you know what's interesting is, and that's a beautiful picture of the car, is these vehicles have become one of the most valuable pieces of art in the world in the last few years, rare cars. Like, so basically, just like you have Picasso's, Basquiat's, all of this high-end artwork, these rare collectible cars, a car maybe driven by, you know, Steve McQueen in the movie Bullet, or maybe one of the first Ferraris raced at Le Mans. Very rare cars have now become highly sought-after collectible, selling for tens of millions of dollars. And what happens is typically very wealthy people purchase them and, you know, restore them into their vintage, you know, original condition, original pieces, putting horsehair in the seats, getting them pristine, and then actually driving them. But just as with any world involving high-end art that's valuable, it also attracts thieves and forgers. And that's what happened here.
No, that's a good point, because even in Chicago, they're still in a Toyota. So that lets you know that if we're talking something even more high-end, I happen to drive a Toyota. If, you know, we're talking even more high-end, they'll steal that too. So I would imagine you were traveling all over the world, kind of following this story to write this book. Any unforgettable characters that you met along the way?
Yeah, there were so many. I mean, honestly, the detective at the heart of my story, Joe Ford, is a fascinating guy. You know, he is basically a broke, you know, he was an architect and then he went to law school and then he kind of traded in rare cars. But he has this very particular skill set of being able to find, if you have a stolen car, being able to retrieve it. And he has a daughter who's going blind. Is sadly, and so he has this real motivation to make money to give her a better life. But you know, I interviewed the FBI, I interviewed authorities across the country and the world, and basically they said, you know, there's no high-end team that can find these cars. You know, that doesn't exist. The FBI has a stolen rare art squad that just focuses on that, but there's no equivalent for the world of cars. So if a $10 million car goes missing, there's one guy they call, and it's this broke detective in Miami who's trying to give his daughter a better life. So he was just a fascinating character, but interestingly, the alleged thief in the story turns out to have been his former best friend and actually a business partner. They worked together coming up in New Orleans in the world of buying and trading rare cars before Joe became a detective and the other one became the subject of a global manhunt involving the FBI. So it's really an incredible story. You don't have to be a car person to like this. It's really about these two former friends turned worst enemies. That is the heart of the tale.
Well, I love cars. Never rode in a $7 million one, but I love cars. When we
Me neither.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. Where is the car now? We saw that beautiful picture, which makes me think that someone has possession of it. Where is it right now?
So the car was found, and criminal cases are all done on it, but there is still ongoing litigation surrounding the exact who exactly owns it at this point. So it is in holding, overseen by the FBI, just outside of Boston in a garage.
How long has it been there?
It's been there for years.
Wow.
You know, this is basically a case involving, there's still litigation surrounding it, so it could be a while before it's resolved. But as you can see, it is beautiful. It's a car that Rob Report called the most beautiful model in the world. It is absolutely fantastic. 1938, designed by Fagoni Falacci. Just an absolutely stunning piece of artwork that in the Downton Abbey era, you know, they used to parade around with these and have matching clothes that they would wear with the car. And then it was traded. It was in Los Angeles, owned by Hollywood moguls. And now it's in holding. But it's just an absolute piece of artwork. And once it's released, it's going to go on to win awards, I'm sure, around the world. Any
idea how many of these were made during that time? And how many are still around?
Yeah, that's a great question. And really that gets to the heart of the matter. What makes these cars valuable is there just isn't many of them. So it needs to have, number one, have been involved in some piece of history. And then number two, these cars also need to have some type of engineering or original aspect or beauty. There was just a handful of these cars originally, only two that actually had this specific type of racing motor. Actually you can go to the Peterson Museum in Los Angeles and see kind of a sister car to this vehicle. The last one that went for sale actually a couple years ago, a very similar model, sold for $14 million. So that just tells you how quickly these are rising in value. This car, when I started reporting, was worth $7 million. That's what it was purchased for. Now it could easily go 14, 15, maybe higher.
And what really determines that value rising? Is it the time? Is it who's connected to the vehicle? What is it that determines the value of it?
It's a great question. I think you're seeing this space become more popular. There was just a report that came out a few years ago, again, detailing how very high-end rare cars have become the fastest rising valuable asset in the world, more than artwork, watches, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, it's a small pool of people who are going to be spending this money. But if you look overarchingly, there's a lot more people with a lot more money around the world. And this is it's kind of a gamble. I talked to one person who said, look, it's just a lot more fun than buying bonds, or even a Picasso that I just hang on the wall. I'd rather buy one of these cars and then be able to drive it and enjoy it as well. And they do appreciate in value just because is with any piece of art, there's just one or two or three of these. There's very few. So if you are a collector and you're looking to purchase it, there's just a limited supply relative to the demand. But it's funny too, because a lot of the really 100 millionaires, billionaires who buy these cars, they take them to these competitions in a Pebble Beach, in a Lake Como, and there's a real competitive atmosphere to it. You actually get the car inspected, just like a best in show at a dog show. They go through it with white gloves, and you kind of drive it around. And there are real bragging rights, and so that is a competitive aspect to this. And sometimes in the pursuit for winning a blue ribbon, sometimes you buy a car that ends up being stolen.
Well, Stayton, maybe we'll get our chance to own something like this. The Powerball is happening this weekend. Maybe if you play, maybe if I play, maybe we win. If you could get any car, this is the random question for you. After following this story, I'm sure you saw some other cars along the way. If you could own any luxury car, what car would it be?
No, it's a great question. Look, my book, The $1 Million Car Detective, available on Amazon right now. The end of the book details perhaps the most famous stolen car in the world, which is a 1965 Aston Martin DB5 that was used in the James Bond film Goldfinger. So there were two cars used in the movie Goldfinger that Sean Connery as James Bond drove around in. One was just the regular Aston Martin. Then the other one they had outfitted with all the machine guns and blades that came out of the tires, the stunt car. That car ended up trading hands after the production, wound up being owned by a real estate developer in the Miami area, and that car was stolen in the middle of the night in a way very similar to the car from Milwaukee that's at the heart of this story. And I spoke with several investigators. There were a lot of theories. It was airlifted out in the night on a giant, cargo plane. People think it's somewhere in the Middle East. But this Detective Joe, who I spoke with, had a brand new theory, and that's actually the end of my book, is kind of his next case, which is chasing James Bond's Goldfinger Aston Martin. And frankly, that's the one I'd like. It doesn't get cooler than that.
And so does that mean that you're going to have another book coming out that's about that story? Because that would be a great story to follow.
It would be, yeah. So if you're a James Bond fan, check out my book. I've got a whole new theory on that. But yeah, there's a lot of different car stories I share in there, and it really is a whole secret world I didn't know about before I started reporting it, but it's absolutely fascinating, has a lot of really compelling tales. All these cars have incredible histories, right? Incredible stories, and it was really a lot of fun digging into those and sharing them with readers.
Yeah, I can't wait to go read your book. I'm going to go get it on Amazon, The $1 Million Car Detective by Stayton Bonner. I want to ask you one final question before I let you go. During your research, did you see anything that was interesting in terms of how people secure their cars? You know, we're used to seeing, on the streets of Chicago, maybe you have, I forget what they call it, where they wrap it up and make sure it has that huge lock on it. Did you see anything like out of the ordinary because these cars are so expensive?
Yeah, this is next level. That's a great question. But look, I spoke with detectives and investigators in this, and what typically happens when a car like this gets stolen and you are a person who can afford this and you're worth hundreds of millions of dollars usually, honestly, if it gets stolen or there's any kind of question about it, you just pay it off. You write it off. Why? Because you don't want it in the news that the car was stolen, number one, because number two, people are then going to know that you have this private collection of cars worth tens of millions of dollars. There are these private garages all over the country nobody knows about. And they're literally, a lot of these collectors build these giant multi-story, you can imagine calling them like a giant man cave, but almost like these private museums full of these cars worth tens of millions of dollars. And you will never know about them. You might pass someone in a cool old car, driving through Boca Raton or driving around Chicago, and you're like, wow, that's a neat car. What you don't know is that person then takes it home and drives it and parks it almost in their back cave, secret back cave, full of other cars. And these are literally private museums that no one knows about, but secrecy is the real key here. But it's absolutely fascinating, and I do go in the book into how some of these private collections are around the country, and it's absolutely amazing.
I got to read your book. I plan to go get it as soon as we're done with this interview. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us on Chicago Now.